Hey all, Alex here at your home of the Music Deep Dive, and today it is time for a review of the 1854 novel by Charles Dickens, Hard Times for These Times. The 10th novel by British author Charles Dickens. Hard Times is kind of a unique one in his catalog, which is probably not the first time I've said something like that in regards to the Dickens catalog. Several of his novels, I think, are very unique in their own ways. This one, I think, is more unique in what it lacks compared to what it necessarily possesses. This is one of the most maybe workman's-like Dickens novels as far as how it was constructed. It was written purposely to save a periodical newsletter that Dickens was running called Household Words, and Dickens' initial intent for that magazine was to not have any sort of serialized fiction in there. He didn't necessarily want to incorporate that side of his writing into the magazine itself, but then the magazine was not selling well. I believe Dickens already had this general idea for a story in his brain, and he decided to ultimately incorporate that into the periodical to try to boost sales. And it worked. But I think because of that, the Hard Times has sort of, it's not regarded maybe as one of his most artistic or inspired works in general, fairly or not, as we will find out. But it definitely has been custom built for the serial format, I think, in a lot of ways. And one of the byproducts of that is Dickens wanting to write something that was a more efficient and streamlined compared to his previous works. So as a result, this is the shortest Dickens novel, and I don't think it's particularly close. He's got other novels that are, within medium length. I think A Tale of Two Cities is kind of an example of that. But as someone who has gone through a lot of the weightier Dickens tomes, which in those Penguin Classics editions can be 800, 900 pages sometimes, this is definitely a marked difference from those. And frankly, it's a bit of a needed one. I can definitely tell you that some of those longer Dickens novels can be a struggle at times, even some of the very best ones. Now, as far as what we get here, this novel, I think the best way I can describe it is that this is essentially Dickens as travel companion. And when I say that, I refer to kind of the economy of it, the economy and the efficiency of the writing, and as a result, the scope of the plot. Compared to some of the other recent Dickens novels that I've reviewed, I think most notably Bleak House, the novel before this one, this novel is not laden down with distractions. It keeps its plot pretty small. It keeps its worldview pretty small. You have side characters to some extent, but there's not very many of them, and they don't dominate the plot. And so as a result, you don't really have too many of the kind of tangents, side quests, if you will, and these kind of extended satires that Dickens likes to do about English society that don't really move the plot forward, but are there for kind of the entertainment piece. Those are not really here in Hard Times. This is a pretty compact plot. Now, I think in part because it's compact, it's one of Dickens' most kind of on-the-nose plots. It's a whole satire of the English education system and the business system, and sort of the differences between class and things like that. And you can tell sometimes, the names of the characters in this one, I think from the beginning, you were introduced to this professor or this teacher named Mr. Gradgrind. And just the name Gradgrind, within a page or two, you understand the significance of what it's trying to represent, and you realize just how on the nose it is. And in my head, I'm kind of like, okay, well, here we go. Is this really going to be the most literal Dickens novel yet? Because I would not necessarily have enjoyed it if it was. And maybe it is, but I found myself enjoying it more than I expected to. I think because we keep things centralized to this relatively small group of characters, I think even if these are not the most vivid, jump off the page type of Dickens characters, there's still sympathy here. I think in particular the character of Louisa is clearly a very sympathetic figure and is meant to be kind of the central figure in the book as far as how she has grown up in this very suppressive household and is very emotionally mature, but has also been a little bit emotionally stunted because of this drive towards productivity, this drive towards profit, and this emphasis on facts and logic and objectivity. And you get to see how that, in a way, ruins her life, right? And it's a sort of, there's a real tragedy there. And then, of course, there's the class differential between the characters of Gradgrind and Mr. Bounderby. The character of Stephen Blackpool is a very sympathetic one. I think, it really distills everything. I keep coming back to this. These are themes that you see in so many other Dickens novels to one degree or another. But in Hard Times, it feels like, Dickens is not padding his stuff for the most part. He's keeping everything pretty concise and he's grounding everything. And it makes this, I think, one of the more accessible Dickens novels that I have explored so far. Again, the writing is really good, and there's certainly moments of humor, but I think Dickens does rein it in very self-consciously here, and really wants to kind of keep the plot moving as much as possible. I think the characters are well written. Like I said, I don't think there's anyone here who would rank among the upper echelon of Dickens protagonists or antagonists for me, but they are effective in what they're doing and in carrying a story along that I think is, for the most part, pretty compelling. I think when push comes to shove, I think of Hard Times, I think of a novel that is very successful in what it's trying to do. It doesn't have very high ambitions. It keeps everything, pretty by the books and pretty straightforward. And I think because of that, it doesn't rank among the best Dickens novels. I don't think most people would put it in that category, and I certainly wouldn't either. But I do think that when you compare it to some of the Dickens novels that I think bite off a little bit more than they can chew, again, I think of Bleak House, at least from my personal reading of the novel, I think this novel works a little bit better. And I think for someone who is trying to get into Dickens, yes, maybe I would probably steer them towards something like an Oliver Twist or something like that. But if you're just looking to get into the core of what Dickens is about, the types of humans and human stories that he wants to write about, you're hard-pressed to find a more effective example of this than Hard Times. I think this works really well for what it is trying to do. So it's not an over-the-moon recommendation, but I did enjoy it. I did find this an easier read, again, than some of the other Dickens novels before this. And for those purposes, I would say, again, if this is your first Dickens novel, I don't think this is a bad choice by any means. And I hope that if this is your first Dickens novel, if you do decide to kind of jump into the waters with something like this, that even if you're not the biggest fan of it, that maybe you try to explore some of his more adventurous and creative stuff. I just think this is a good kind of, ground floor level of trying to get into his writing. So, Hard Times, quite a good novel. Honestly surprised that I liked it as much as I did, but well worth a read, in my opinion. With that, I want to thank you all so much for watching. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. As always, more reviews are to come. Hit that bell for notifications and tell a friend as well. Thanks so much, and I will see you next time right here at your home of the Music Deep Dive.